We have functioning nodes in our skill tree that aren't connected yet and also don't have costs yet, but we can unlock stuff and it increases, in this case, our HP. Now I want to look at doing this text block down here. We put that in the previous video, and that's going to be displaying the costs that we need to pay in order to unlock this node. And also going to allow us to check if we actually can pay that cost before unlocking the node to begin with. All in all, this is actually a relatively simple setup. So we're going to go into our skill tree folder, into our classes, and we're going to be making a new data asset class here. So we once again just go pick parent class, all classes, and we look for the data assets, picking the primary data assets, and we'll call that something like BP skill unlocker. And in this, we can add in a couple of functions. So the very first thing that we need to add in is can unlock skill. And this is just going to check whether or not our skill can actually be unlocked. So we give in certain information and then we output a bool value out of that. So we probably want to input some sort of player reference because we'll likely have to sample something from the player, be it experience, be it something like an item, whatever we want to do really. So let's just put in a pawn reference for the player there. And then in outputs, obviously, we want to see if we can unlock the skill. And that is going to be a type bool. Now, just like we did before, I'm going to actually put in a print string here, because this is never going to be called. This should never be called. This is only the placeholder for every other class that comes after this that's going to overwrite this with their own implementation. So I just very simply wrote a quick little thing here in my reference project. If you've seen the last video, this will be or the video before that actually, this will be very familiar with you. This is just going to print out in a red color, base unlocker class function call, can unlock skill, override function in class, and then it's going to print out the class that we accidentally called this on. Again, this is a function that never should be directly called, only there to be overwritten. And as such, we're going to go into the class settings here, just like we did before. And we're actually going to make this a abstract class so that we can't directly instantiate this. Again, this is only a class that's meant to have a template to make child classes of. Never should be directly instantiated as an asset. Then we can add a new function as well, which will be getUnlockText, and this will just be the text that we will display on screen to show what we need to unlock to our player. So that's going to potentially as well take in a player pawn. Maybe it doesn't even need to take in a player pawn, but you can do really whatever you want with that. I like just being able to give in the player, because if any of the things down the line, any of the children, for some reason need to get something from the player here, for the most part, especially in this unlock text, you probably won't need to, but it's good to have that, because you can't, when overriding something, then add in new parameters in the child versions of this. So you need to set up the potential parameters that the children might be needing to use, all within this parent class that we're working on right now. So that's going to be a pawn object reference, just like before. And of course, this is going to output a text. So we just put in text. And here as well, instead of doing a print string, because we don't really execute this is just going to be returning a value. We still want to return a default value of some kind of warning. So this is going to say base class override function to add cost text. And that's pretty much everything there is to this one. And finally, we can now check, or at least we have a function to check. We still need to write the override for it in a moment. But we can check whether or not we can unlock a skill. We can display that text. But now we also need to be able to apply the cost for unlocking a skill. Because if we say we use our experience as a currency, like in a Souls-like game, or maybe we want to be able to take away an item from an inventory to unlock certain things. Again, this is being used now in the context of a skill tree, but because this is all asset-based, this is very much going to allow us to also use these same assets to maybe unlock things outside of the context of a skill tree and just in the world. You can make this skill unlocker be used by something like a door, which needs a certain key to enter, right? It's a very reusable type of system. So what we want to do is we want to have one more function, and that is apply unlock cost, which, to nobody's surprise, is going to take an input for the player. And that's going to be, I just make these all of type born so that they are as reusable as possible. You could make this just directly the type of class that your player is. You could make this a character. You could even make it more generic. You could just make this a general object so that you can give in specific data objects or whatever. That's entirely up to what you want to do. We're going to stick with born here because it is a good mix between being generic but not too generic. And much like the first function that we did here, I'm just going to copy over this set of nodes again, because we're going to be printing a string, base unlock a function call, apply unlock cost, override function in class, get class display name from get class from self. Again, this is not entirely necessary. This doesn't do anything aside from letting you know that you are calling a function that shouldn't be called. So that is the entire setup for making the base class. So again, we're not going to be using this one directly. So what we do is we come up to the class asset in our folder structure, and then we create a child blueprint of it. And we'll call this BP XP cost or something like that. And this is going to be the blueprint that we use for any amount of experience cost. So we can make different assets that represent costing 50 or 100 or 500 experience. Everything that's going to be costing experience is going to be a asset of this type. So with that, we want to override pretty much every single one of these functions that we just made. And we're not going to be wanting to call the parent functions because, again, those parent functions are not meant to actually run code. All they're meant to do is just be placeholders for something that is overridable. Because that way we can always just have references in our code to this base class, and then whatever the actual implementation is in whatever child class we're working with, that code will get run. So in this case, our player is going to need to have some sort of experience value. So let's go into our blueprints here, our blueprint character. And along with the HP value that I gave it a while ago, I'm going to just give it an experience value as well. It's also going to be a float. And let's just say that by default, we started off with having 1,000 experience, just so that we have something to spend as we test this system out. Back in the XP costs blueprint, now making sure that we've both compiled and saved the player actually, we can get the can unlock skill function, and we can cast our player reference to our BP third person character. And from there, we can get the XP value. So now we can figure out how much XP the player has in this asset. We need to compare that to the amount of XP that this asset will be representing. So we just check, hey, is our XP greater than or equal to? And we can then drag off of this and promote this to a variable, not a local variable, just a normal variable. I made a local variable before. And we'll call that something like XP needed, because it'll be the XP that we need to upgrade this. You can make that exposed if you want to. And that's pretty much all that we need. We need to know, is the XP that we have currently, is that more than the XP that we need for this asset? And that's then what we can return. If this cast fails, we're trying to provide in something that shouldn't be provided in. You can add in a print string here if you want to, telling you like, hey, cast failed in XP cost calculation. We're not going to do that right now. All we need to do is just return unlock being false, because obviously we gave in a type of object that's not worth checking, so most likely we don't want to allow that unlock. Next up is the can unlock skill text that'll do. And this is pretty easy. We don't even really need the reference to the player for this. Again, we just included that in case we need some information from the player in a different version of what this could do. But here, all that we really do is we can just make a literal text. And This is going to be a little bit weird because when we have texts, these are translatable, right? These work with Unreal's localization systems. We first want to put in the actual text here as a text. So let's call this just XP required. And then we need to put in a value, but we can't just append a other value to a text variable. So what we need to do first is we need to get this as a text. Then we need to translate this to a string, because when it is a string, we can append something to it. So we have XP required, and then we can append our XP needed value. So we drag that in, put that in, and then those will append into one singular string. And then that can translate back into a text for our return node. And lastly, once we know that we can unlock the skill, we need to apply the cost. Again, this might depend on whatever type of game you're making, but it's good to set up a basic system to allow for this, right? So we once again just cast to our third-person player character. We also are going to assume that this apply unlock cost only ever runs after the can unlock skill has already been successful, because that's the way that we're going to set up our code here. You could very much, of course, just run can unlock skill on this player first within this apply unlock cost as well, to make 1000% sure that what we're trying to do is actually possible. This is a little bit of extra security for that. It's up to you whether or not you want to put that in here. I'm not gonna, but it's not unreasonable to put that node in there as well. Anyway, we want to then set our XP value on our player to being its current XP value, so we get the XP value as well, minus the XP cost that we have from our XP needed. This just effectively, as you are used to updating like things like HP, anything, you just get its current value, subtract what you want to subtract, and that's going to be the new value. And that's everything we need here. Again, if you have an item system with an inventory or whatever, you can very much use this to call remove item from inventory. So now we have our XP costs class. We don't have any assets of it yet, so let's make a new folder here for organizational purposes, which we'll call unlock assets or unlocker assets, whatever you want to call that. And we'll just add 2 of them. You're going to go into miscellaneous, data assets, and there we can get our XP cost. Again, note that the base class for skill unlocker isn't available here because we made it abstract. We can only use the classes that are made of it. XP costs, we'll just call this costs 100 XP, and we open that up, and all that we need to fill in here is the XP cost for 100. Now, for a lot of skill tree systems, maybe you always want to just have XP cost of like certain types of resources, and you want to be able to just set that more easily on a per node basis instead of having a bunch of different assets that are pre-programmed to set up these things. You can still kind of twist this system to do something like that. The whole thing about this system is that it is very expandable. Because it is entirely asset-based, it means that you can very easily just make a new class here with new scripting that does new specific stuff, and then you can have a bunch of assets with different actual values for those. Downside being is that for every single variation of XP needed, you're more or less always going to be needing a new asset, which can be a little annoying if you have a whole lot of things that have slightly different values needed for unlocking. So it's by no means the perfect system. It just depends on whether or not you want something super straightforward or if you want something super scriptable and expandable. I tend to lean more towards the latter personally. But let's say that we also want one that unlocks at 250 XP. So all we need to do is we just need to make a new asset, give the value in as 250, and that's pretty much all there is to that. Now with that, we need to go back in, of course, and implement using these assets into our actual skill tree. So first things first, I think what we're going to do is we're going to go into our skill tree node. That's the most important part. And in our graph here, where we already have a skill to unlock asset reference, we also want to make a new variable with the unlocker assets. And that's very easily just going to be of type BP skill unlocker object reference. We expose that, and that's pretty much all that we need to do with this. Because again, the skill nodes themselves actually don't really tend to run much code anymore. All that they do is just hold the information and the references to the things that matter. It's the other blueprints that we've been setting up that actually run all the code. So that's mostly done in this case through things like the skill info. So opening up that skill info, we can pretty much immediately go into our graph. If you've seen the last video, you should be up to date with everything that this does. And really all we need to do here is we already have our skill node that we're displaying the information from. So instead of just getting the stuff from skill to unlock, we now can also get our unlocker assets and very easily just get the unlock text from that. Now, get unlock text is a normal function. That really doesn't need to be the case. So if we double click on that, we can go back into the actual BP skill unlocker. And we can just click on either the input or the output node and mark it as being pure. It's really not that big a deal one way or the other. The only difference is that it becomes one of these little green nodes that doesn't have execution pins. The big difference there being is that a normal node with execution pins, the outputs get kind of locked into place at the moment of execution, where these green nodes just get rerun whenever an actual execution node calls their output pin. So we get this unlock text, and then I just need to look real quick which one of these we have the cost is what it is called, and we'll just set the text on that. So set text on this to whatever text this outputs, and then we probably want to, just to be sure, provide in a reference to the player. We can just do that from the get player pawn node. I'm just going to copy the one that we had down there. Again, we're not using that in this case, but in the future, whatever you're doing with your system, you might, and you just want this widget to actually provide that in, just in case. So now, just to make sure that everything that we have set up is working so far, let's go into our actual skill tree widgets and give in, this one's going to cost 100, this one's going to cost 250, and let's also make one that is just entirely free. So what we can do there is go back into our classes, and I'm going to just duplicate with Ctrl and D our XP cost, and we'll call this free unlock. And the reason that I'm making this different is just because what I want to do is apply unlock cost. I just want to make all of these empty, really. I don't really, I can always unlock this. Something that's free to unlock is always unlockable. And the unlock text is going to just be get it for free. Something like that. Of course, this unlock text, you can also just make a variable if you want to, so that you can set them on a per asset basis instead of needing to make an entirely new class for it. That way we could just say, hey, it takes 0 XP, and we give in a new text for it. That might be a little bit better, because now we made an entire class for something that's only going to have 1 asset in it, which might not be ideal. That's entirely up to what you want to do with it, but we can just make a BP free unlock now, and we'll call this cost free. And if we go back into the skill tree, we can set this last one up as being free. So let's see if everything we have set up actually works. I will add this thing to the viewport, and now we can see XP required 250. And here it is 100, and here it says get it for free. So all this works entirely from the display side of things. But now we also need to actually start checking if we have the required stuff for this. So that we also do in our skill info. This isn't just a skill info, because we also are handling the button input for actually unlocking the skills. So what we do here is in update skill info, first and foremost, we check if we have a skill node to display to begin with. But if we do, we set some information in it. We also are going to set whether or not this button, which we have a reference to in our variables here. We're going to set that being either enabled or disabled. And if we disable a button, it'll still be present, it'll still be visible, you just can't click on it. So all that we really need to do there is get our unlocking assets and check can unlock skill, which once again, this is maybe okay to be a pure node. This one makes a little bit more sense to be a execution node, because you want to check in this moment, at this point in the execution flow, can we unlock it still? But if we can unlock it or not, that's going to be setting this button to being enabled or not. So set is enabled. That's just a thing that you can do with any widget, by the way. And if we can unlock, this will be enabled. And if we cannot unlock, this will be disabled. Now, this also very much means that if we click on something, we want to refresh the update info. Because after we click on something, we want to recheck if we still can unlock it. So we're going to be checking in the next video, then also whether this was already like granted or unlocked, so that we can only do one click per node. Because right now we can just spam the same node over and over again. Obviously, we don't want to be able to do that. But that's going to be in the next video. For now, all that we need to do is after we click on the button, we unlock skill to player, and then we just update skill info again. And we can just update the skill info and give in the same skill node that we already have. This is just refreshing it. And even before we do that, actually, we want to, because we are checking if we can unlock the skill, but we're never actually applying that cost. And we only want to do that once the button is clicked. So this is whenever we update the skill info, we're setting whether or not the skill can be unlocked, allowing the player to press the button or not. Then when the actual button is pressed, before we update the skill info to refresh it, what we want to do is we want to get our skill node that we're displaying and the unlock assets. And then we want to actually apply that unlock cost with the function that we set up. It's going to take in the player pawn as well. Now, if you have very specific potential implementations, you might want to first unlock and then apply cost, or first apply cost and then unlock. That should effectively be the same thing. These two things shouldn't really conflict with each other, but in very specific situations, depending on what you're making, the order here might be better swapped. And just to be thorough, what I'm also going to do here is in the actual skill tree menu, which I don't remember where that is. It's this one. I'm going to put in just a little text that's going to display the amount of experience that our player has. I'm going to do that fairly inefficiently. I'm just going to throw that into the tick event because it's just for demonstrational purposes. Obviously, you'd ideally only want to set the text and update it here when that value actually changes. But for the time being, this is just so that you can see what's going on. So get player pawn, we cast that to our third person character. We get the XP value, and that's just going to be the text that we set. Again, just so that we can see in the actual UI that our cost is getting applied. And of course, you do need to hook up the execution pins on the casting node. And now we will see. I can select any of these nodes, and this will cost 250. I've got 1,000. I click unlock. I've only got 750 left. And if I keep doing this with, let's say, just 100 at a time, if I go down to only having 150 left, now, when I click on this thing, you can see that this is grayed out. This is just what Unreal does when you disable a button. It grays it out, and I can no longer click on it. If I go back to this 100 XP required, you'll see if I click on this, I'll go under 100, I only have 50 left, and it's going to be refreshed because we're refreshing every time that we click on that button. And now this as well is disabled. This one, however, still, because it's entirely free, is going to allow me to infinitely unlock over and over and over again. So we've got our cost system set up now for these different skill nodes. If you want the current state of the project or the finished project, I always have the finished project on these ready as well. There's a link down below in the description to YouTube members and Patreons to snoop around in the code as we develop it. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. My Cave students tier supporters, Oiku, Earl, Monseville Erno, and my Cave Digger tier supporters, Mauricio Farias.